So my name is Diane Evans-Mack, and I am a regional wildlife biologist with Idaho Fish and Game here in the McCall office. I think we have a really nice variety of birds. I mean, sandhill cranes are just a very unique and iconic bird for this area and for many parts of the state and the West, because they're so big and visible and have such a crazy vocalization, right? So people know what they are, and people always talk about, oh, I heard the first cranes of the season in the spring when they come back, and start landing in the fields and deciding where they're going to nest and all of that. And here they are just a species that people get really excited about. And because they wander around these open fields and pastures, they're visible and they're representative of that landscape. And so they're just another species that we would want to potentially, provide habitat for by maintaining these open agricultural areas or open pasture land or meadow, wet meadows. We've got a pretty diverse group of habitats around here. So there's a lot of open field, pasture, or natural meadows in Long Valley, which is a big part of Valley County. We have all the lakes and the river systems. We have riparian habitat that is, right along the river corridor that tends to be fairly shrubby and brushy or somewhat forested. We have open meadows, we have ag land, and then we have this mostly transitional from dry ponderosa pine forest into the mixed conifer forest as we creep up just a little bit in elevation, because we're already at 5,000 feet, so we don't have to go very far to get out of the dry pine and get into that real mixed and eventually the higher elevation spruce fir forest.
My name is Craig Utter, and I'm the executive director of the Payette Land Trust. Valley County is an incredibly magical place. I think what really makes me care about this job is the fact that I have an opportunity to work within a community that is growing and looking for balance and trying to find ways to not only see a mountain community grow, but conserve the whole reason why everybody wants to be here.
From a recreation standpoint, we kind of have the best of both worlds here, where we have a strong community that has pretty much everything that a person like me could need, because I don't need I don't need a big city, don't need a whole lot of stuff, but we have immediate access to beautiful places, lakes and rivers and mountains, and the ability to recreate in those in any number of ways, as long as we do that responsibly and don't try to make sure that there's still adequate habitat and safeguards for wildlife. I think the two are quite compatible.
When people came to this area, the river bottom is where all of the private land happened. So everything that's up at elevation is in Forest Service ground. And then the next level down was private timber company. And then the valley floor was agriculture. So we see all the farms and ranches that were here during the homestead times on the valley floor. And what that means is that is also the place where all the private land exists. And because the private land is in the valley floor, that's where the development is going to happen. But it's all concentrated on this one unique ecosystem that has an incredible amount of variety. I think from a land use standpoint, the goal from the Payette Land Trust is to find the balance between development and conservation. We look at agricultural corridors, the use that exists right now. How can we conserve that? Because we've got a homeostasis, so to speak, within the valley that is starting to be disrupted with the movement of folks across the country to places like Idaho.
Healthy farmlands provides great habitat for birds that occur in those places. If it's if it's allowed to have a shrub component, if the grasses get tall enough to protect the nesting birds like meadowlarks, ground nesting birds that use them during the nesting season. If there's water running through farmland and those riparian areas can be maintained, yeah, it's a great compatible use between ranching and farming and wildlife habitat.
One of the main ways that Payette Land Trust can really help affect conservation in the valley is through conservation easements. And a conservation easement provides for a certain set of uses on a piece of property where it may restrict other uses. So what we can do is we can have an easement that allows agriculture. We can have an easement that allows 1 or 2 buildings on a large acreage site. But in the end, it's looking towards conservation as the main objective. We also offer things like a nonprofit organization that you can donate a piece of land to. And that's exactly what we have here today. We're standing on the Huffman property that was donated to the Payette Land Trust by Phyllis Huffman. And she asked us to keep it in the traditional use, which was agriculture.
My name is Nikki LeClaire. I've lived in McCall since 1975. There's wildlife down in the forest. They come up here every night. Elk, deer, there's coyotes, there's owls and blue herons and sandhill cranes, and they know the animals are protected here. It means that this will be like this forever, perpetuity, which is amazing. To preserve this land in a land trust, we're using the land the way it has been in the past, but we're not cutting it up into little parcels and putting houses on it and having more impact of more population into these open spaces. The cattle can still graze on the land, the fields can still be hayed, but they're still open space.
The Payette Land Trust works with individual private landowners to conserve their property, but that doesn't just mean conservation easements and non-development. We'll also talk about best management practices for the kind of land that we're working with. So that may be a piece of forested ground, that may be a piece of farm ground, it may be open range land, or it may be a piece of wetland habitat that someone wants to conserve.
If there's any sort of water source that runs through agricultural lands, trying to maintain the integrity of that water quality-wise and the condition of the stream bank and the riparian vegetation, the shrubby vegetation that grows up along those open riparian corridors, that's really important.
We're going to have to move at a pace that meets the growing expansion of Idaho and of Boise and of the Valley, which means more and more organizations are going to have to come together to work collectively towards the same goal. If somebody has some land that they would like to put into a conservation easement, the first thing to do is contact the land trust, and we'll set up an appointment to go out and look at your property. And then our first and foremost goal is to have a discussion about the land ethic. What do you want to see? Why do you want to put it into a conservation easement? What are your goals? What are your goals for your family? How will this affect the long-term ownership of the property? And once we go through the ethical discussion, then we can start talking about the easement itself. So there are multiple opportunities for folks to help out the land trust. And it may be as simple as just donating funding to the land trust. Currently, we have more requests for conservation than we have capacity to handle. And we're looking to increase our staff, but before we can do that, we have to have the funding. So contacting the land trust, signing up on our website to receive our newsletter is a fantastic way to keep in touch with the land trust so that when there are opportunities to be involved, you know about them.
Do it. It just protects our properties. It protects our open space, protects our valley.